a mega project that involved more than 150 countries across the world, where new airports, motorways, and seaports were promised. Dreams were sold of creating the next Dubai and Singapore. But today, in many of these same countries, those mega projects lie incomplete, and those dreams shattered. Some nations are buried under mountains of debt, while others are left with ruins. This was China's grandest global mega project known as the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Once called the project of the century, it is now described as a geopolitical disaster. And the nations that suffered the most are the poor countries who were shown the most beautiful dreams. But what really happened that made the world start questioning even a superpower like China? Welcome back to another video of Worldly Wonders. When Chinese President Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, it was hailed as the most ambitious plan of the century. The goal was to create a modern Silk Road, a network of railways, highways, and ports connecting Asia, Africa, and Europe. China's mission was to help developing countries progress, and at the same time, to present itself as a global leader. The world was stunned by this vision. Over 140 nations expressed interest, and many poor countries rushed to take loans from China. Before long, China had poured $1.2 trillion into the project. But this money was not aid, it was loans. Loans given to countries that Western banks and the IMF had already deemed too risky. Soon, the reality behind BRI began to unfold. It wasn't just an infrastructure project, it was also a geopolitical and economic strategy. China's industrial capacity had grown so massive that it was producing far more engineers, factories, and materials than it needed. Instead of slowing down production, China decided to export it, along with its influence. The plan was simple: lend money to poor countries for massive infrastructure projects, then use Chinese companies, materials, and labor to build them, keeping the profits within China. But the biggest controversy surrounding BRI is what came to be known as debt trap diplomacy. China gave out so many loans that many countries could never repay them, forcing them to hand over their land or strategic infrastructure to China. One of the clearest examples is Sri Lanka. Its leaders were promised that if they built a new port on the Indian Ocean, it could become a trade hub like Dubai. The country already had the busy Colombo port, but China convinced them to build another. The Hambantota port. Sri Lanka borrowed $1.3 billion from China. But the terms were strict, only Chinese firms could build it. Interest rates were low, but if the loan wasn't repaid, China had the right to seize control. Construction finished, but the port never took off. Feasibility studies later revealed that there was no real need for another port in that area, and only around 30 to 40 ships stopped there in an entire year. By 2017, unable to repay the debt, Sri Lanka was forced to lease the port to China for 99 years. All the revenue from it now goes to China, and Sri Lanka effectively lost part of its sovereignty. But Sri Lanka wasn't alone. In Zambia, a small African nation dependent on copper exports, leaders borrowed heavily from China to modernize their economy. They were told that Western loans came with tough conditions, but they ignored the dangers in China's fine print. By 2020, 43% of Zambia's total external debt was owed to China. When COVID-19 hit and copper demand collapsed, Zambia defaulted. Many BRI projects became what experts now call white elephant projects, grand and expensive, but useless in reality. Take Montenegro. a small European country that took a $1 billion loan from China in 2014 to build a highway through the mountains. The construction was poorly planned, and the funds ran out after just 41 kilometers, a road that led to nowhere. The cost was so high that Montenegro's debt rose above 80% of its GDP, forcing it to seek help from the IMF and the EU. Sri Lanka also built an airport near Hambantota, the Matala Rajapaksa International Airport, costing $200 million, again financed by Chinese loans. But airlines never came, and passengers never showed up. Today, it's known as the world's emptiest airport, so deserted that elephants and animals are often seen wandering on its runways. In South America, Ecuador joined BRI to solve its energy crisis by building the Coca-Codo-Sinclair Dam with Chinese contractors, a $2.6 billion project. But corruption, poor construction, and bribery led to a disaster. The dam now has over 17,000 cracks and is at risk of collapse, a potential environmental catastrophe. Then came Pakistan's turn with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor worth $60 billion. Pakistan hoped it would bring electricity, jobs, and prosperity, but most projects faced delays or failed. In Gwadar, people protested against power shortages, lack of water, and Chinese control. Jobs never came, and Pakistan's debt burden grew heavier. Today, 91% of Gwadar Port's revenue goes to China, leaving Pakistan with only 9%. The BRI suffered another major blow when Italy, the only G7 country to join, decided to withdraw. Italy hadn't taken loans but had signed agreements promising Chinese investment. When those promises failed, Italy called its involvement a big mistake. Similarly, Malaysia, Myanmar, Bangladesh, and Nepal canceled or renegotiated several BRI projects. Seeing BRI's failures, the US and Europe launched their own alternatives. The Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment and the EU's Global Gateway, both promoting transparency and low-interest loans to help nations avoid China's debt traps. As a result, China and Russia have grown closer, isolated after the war in Ukraine. Russia has aligned itself with China through BRI, forming a new geopolitical axis that challenges US dominance. After 10 years and trillions of dollars, the Belt and Road Initiative is now regarded as one of modern history's biggest foreign policy failures. The main reason? BRI was never truly about development. It was about China's own interests. China sought to export its excess industrial capacity, gain access to raw materials, and expand its geopolitical power. Most of its loans were issued in Chinese yuan, as part of its push to globalize its currency. Now, China is trying to rebrand BRI as BRI 2.0, focusing on digital infrastructure, green energy, and sustainable projects. But the world is no longer willing to trust promises alone. Countries today demand real economic benefits, not just more debt. The question remains, did China actually benefit from BRI? Not as much as it hoped. Instead of gaining control, China earned a reputation for debt-trap diplomacy, and its own economy slowed down. Managing seized assets and collecting unpaid loans became a heavy burden. Still, China now holds stakes, direct or indirect, in over 100 ports worldwide, which helps its export economy. If fully completed, BRI would form the longest road, rail, and sea network in the world, connecting Asia to Europe and covering 65% of the global population. Hope you enjoyed this video from Worldy Wonders. Don't forget to like and share, and thank you for your continued love and support. See you in the next one.